Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. You remember me? I'm that guy that went away for a little while. Chad said I was in Kazakhstan. No, it wasn't Kazakhstan or Turkmenistan or any one of those things, but I was gone for a while. But now I'm back and I'm glad to be with you. Welcome to Humpday Happy Hour with Dentists in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It is live and it is over my first glass of wine in a little while. Got back after the trip and cruise and got a little bit of the funk, but I'm back now. Hopefully, all ready to go and get fired up into the new office. So again, welcome to Humpday Happy Hour with Dentists in the Know. I am joined by two of my best friends in the world who I missed very much for 2 weeks. And somehow the world went on without me. I'm sure they did a killer job. Anyway, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell are my co-hosts. Our job, obviously, as business owners and as educators, is to bring all of you in the know. So, Chad, JB, why don't you come up? I missed you guys. It's good to see you.
Good to be seen. How you doing, Jeff? Welcome back to America.
Yes. The U.S. and A.
The U.S. and A. Yes. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Great success.
It was good to be back. That was first 2 straight week trip. Like I haven't done that before. Like be gone for 2 straight weeks. And then, of course, came back with a little illness and make that 3 straight weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I have zero monies.
I know my money.
Zero monies.
I have zero monies.
Great success.
I have new buildings. I have lots of vacation time, but I have zero monies.
Yeah.
I need Pat. We need to talk to our guest about that tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's been going on with you two? We've just had some little text threads, but I want to hear, how did it go? How were the last 2 weeks? This is the first time I was gone that I couldn't even tune in because of the time change.
JB.
Well, Chad made us shut it down 1 week.
Yeah.
So we took
That's right.
Too.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that. Now.
Just circumstances didn't work in our favor. And then last week we had a great guest, one of Chad's golfing buddies, but we talked myofunctional therapy, and I got to be honest, like you should have been there. You know,
Who's what?
You should have been there. Myofunctional therapy and
that would have been great. I would have loved that. But
geeking
I am
out
sorry
a
I
bit
missed
on
that.
all the things. So it's been good.
Yeah, we talked pretty much all things ortho, and
but we also bitched about referrals and like
it was a really kind of open-ended conversation. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to go back and watch it, or I might download it where I happen to download all my podcasts.
Wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right wording is.
Podcasts,
I'm still working on that.
So,
all right.
anyhow.
Well, we have a great guest who I had the pleasure of meeting in Daphne, Alabama, and he's going to be coming on. He is not only an accomplished dentist, a fellow in the Academy of General Dentistry, but he is also an accountant. So he brings a really unique perspective, and I'm excited. I actually got to listen to him. I was hosting an event, so I got to sit in his course, loved it, just opened my eyes to a lot of things. So we're going to be talking to him right after the news. But JB, would you like to talk about disgruntled patients or violence or anything of the sort?
I'll just go straight to the news.
Okay.
How's it? Until there is a disgruntled patient and a dentist duking it out in a waiting room, and that makes the news, then I guess we'll just talk about the boring stuff. I guess you guys know there might have been a debate last night. Maybe there's an election in November. So certainly that seems to be top of mind for many, and kind of clogging up a bit of the news cycle. So forgive me, but I feel like Congress isn't doing a whole lot, and everybody's sort of in a holding pattern until November, and then we kind of know what the next 4 years may look like, and then start to make moves based on that. So to be honest, other than celebrity news of like titanium grills and, those types of things, there's not a ton happening in the world of dental news. There are a few things, which I think you might find of interest. We've talked a lot about the Dentist and Dental Hygiene Compact. There are 10 states currently that have signed on to that. Well, that group, the way that the rules were written about the compact, they had to have 7 states to be the benchmark, and then they could form an entity. The entity has been formed. They had their first meeting in late August. That was their first board meeting. They had an elected representative from each state that would represent that particular state's compact. Feels a little bit like the Declaration of Independence was going to be written or something as we're pulling these states together. But they were starting to work out the rules. They had an attorney and starting to sort of conceptualize what this process would look like. They're also actively building the database, which will require cooperation from those 10 states that are on board with the compact so that they have access to all licensees and their information in a consolidated format. So, if you're applying for a license in Ohio and you're coming from another state, maybe in the compact or not, but you want to leverage the compact for that state that you're moving to, they have to have access to a database for licensure. So they are moving forward, and their anticipated first license designees through the compact are hoping in fall of 2025. So I think they have a pretty, I would say it's a fairly aggressive timeline, but maybe the benchmark is how fast the government works. So maybe this is actually a very reasonable timeline, that they'll have things in place and be ready to start giving licenses through the compact, which are transfer licenses from one state to another for dentists and dental hygienists as of fall of 2025. So we'll keep you posted as that information starts to kind of unfold. Then we'll see what the requirements are going to be, how expensive is that process going to be. And I would imagine we'll start to see more and more states come on as the devil in the details starts to get worked out. Then you may see more activity on the state level. So we'll keep you posted on that. CODA is also looking at a few new revisions in their program, and they are having an open call for information. If you are really passionate about CODA, which is the Commission on Dental Accreditation, CODA is involved in kind of giving their blessing, standards, protocol, et cetera, for most educational programs, for sure in the dental school arena, but also in dental hygiene. And so it is important, if you have a vested interest in how our professionals are being educated, the type of programming they're receiving, what the requirements are for pre-doctoral program, advanced education in general dentistry, general residency programs, general practice residency programs, hygiene, oral facial pain education. All of these things are going to potentially be discussed during that particular open period. This is 5 to 6 p.m. on October 10th. That's 5 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You have to be present or at least submit your feedback through that online portal. They won't look at written or emailed correspondence related to any of the changes that they're proposing in their standards. So if you want to be active in that particular process or have your voice heard, which I think is really important, it has to be through the online portal or on that open Zoom call, which will be on October 10th. We can post the details for that later. And lastly, it is important. We've talked about this a couple of times. We talked about the bill that is the Corporate Transparency Act, which was a bill that was coming out, started at the first of the year, asking for all small businesses, all businesses actually, to register with the government, which would be kind of a census type format where they would get some information about that particular entity, number of employees, how much gross receipts they're receiving on an annual basis, et cetera. And they would register with the government. Well, there's been a lot of pushback and there's been a lot of delays. It was supposed to go into effect this summer, and that's already been delayed again. And there's more push. Actually, ADA joined over 150 other trade organizations outside of dentistry. I'm sure a few others in dentistry, but outside of dentistry, supporting a delay in that legislation to continue to push that out. The deadline for filing that information was year end. The issue that we've run into, and I had the same issue with my own CPA, a lot of the rules and regulations haven't actually been distributed out to accountants, et cetera, on how we can actually go forward with this legally. Who's going to help these small businesses prepare these Corporate Transparency Act filings? Where are they going to get the information, et cetera? Who's going to sign, stamp, and seal that information is accurate and correct? And so there just seems to be a lot of details that have been left out of the process. And so many are pushing now for an extension of that deadline, which I certainly think is quite possible. Given the fact that it's an election year and that there's a lot going on, it seems like it could be delayed just because it's not the time to be dealing with these types of things. So we'll keep you posted. Otherwise, all dental offices that would qualify as small businesses, really all dental offices, would have this obligation for filing at the year end. Maybe our guest knows a little bit more, given his accounting background, and he can certainly provide us some more information. But we're continuing to watch that as well. With that, that's the news.
Great news segment. But
Thanks.
One thing that I do think that we need to mention before we go much further is today is a day that will always be remembered by our country. Very somber day for many. We lost a lot of lives 23 years ago. It's a day that we'll never forget, and just wanted to make sure that we let everybody know that we are cognizant of that, and we are very much, we've been thinking very much of those that we lost and those that were our heroes that day as well. So, and those that we lost beyond as well. So it's always, September 11th is always an interesting day. So just wanted to let that out there before we got too much further.
Amen. Thanks, Chad.
Amen.
All right. Well, let's bring our guest on, who has been waiting very patiently down there. Chad, do you think you can pull the trigger while I introduce him?
I can do
You
that.
think we can get him on before 9 o'clock?
There he is.
There he is. All right. There's Dr. Pat Little. So, Pat, first, thanks for being with us. As I mentioned, this is really, I'm excited to have you on tonight because I was telling everyone out there that I had a unique opportunity to actually sit and listen to you. I wish it had been an entire day. I was furiously taking notes. Actually came home, and this is a topic that really interests my wife because she's got the most to lose. So when I got back, we actually talked for a long time about some of the things that we talked about. So Dr. Pat Little brings a really unique blend of skill and experience to all of his presentations. They focus primarily on risk management and practice management. And he has a very unique perspective because he is, as I said, both an accountant and a dentist. Usually dentists are the furthest things from accountants. And many accountants, even though they're very skilled in what they do, may not be really aware of all the internal things that happen in a dental office that can help them help you mitigate risks. So that's what I'm so excited to talk with Pat about today. So he integrates all those things with education. He was a practicing dentist, very accomplished, fellow in the Academy of General Dentistry. So glad to hear that. Yep. Unfortunately, an injury left him where he was not able to practice full time. And so he decided to go and learn something else. And he became an accountant. He is now working with a group called Prosperident. He does embezzlement examinations. He helps advise dentists in matters of fraud, embezzlement, and even some future planning. So he provides practice management coaching to dentists and their teams. And this is something that, guys, if we want to stay independent, we need people like Pat to help coach us all the way through. There was a time where it was easy to be profitable, not as easy anymore. Anyway, away from the office, he loves presenting dental education courses nationwide and maintaining his high golf handicap. So you can play with him, Chad. Anyway, please, everyone, welcome Dr. Pat Little. Pat, thanks for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you, Jeff, so much. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to your lecture, and there were so many things that stood out to me that were just eye-opening. So let me go back with you, because you were in private practice and then sustained an injury, I guess, that didn't allow you to practice full time anymore. What made you think accounting? I'm going to go be an accountant. Like that, I could tell you that would never go through my mind, because I don't have enough axons firing up here to really do that.
Well, I guess it's the OCD in me. I've just always been a numbers person. Even in high school, I was balancing my checkbook to the penny. So I've just always been a numbers person. But I love dentistry. I started 2 private practices from scratch. But as you said, I've dealt with cervical vertebrae issues for my entire career. And I was actually prepping a 3-unit bridge on a patient. And my office manager came in and asked a question. I just turned my neck to look up at her and felt a shot go down my arm. And a few years later, I had cervical fusion surgery. So it's kind of hard to practice dentistry when your fingers are numb half the time. And I decided being the numbers guy at the age of 50. I went back to college and became an accountant. Wanted at the time to be a dental CPA. But after doing a couple of internships in CPA firms, one of them during tax season, I decided public accounting is not what I wanted to do. And that's when I was introduced to David Harris of Prosperident through a mutual friend, Linda Miles. Some of you may know.
Linda's a great friend of the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a wonderful human being.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Absolutely.
Linda was my first mentor getting onto this lecture circuit when I decided I wanted to make that jump, not only as an embezzlement investigator and consultant, but I wanted to lecture at Nationwide Dentally. And she was one of my early mentors, and she introduced me to David Harris at Prosperident. And I've been associated with them for 12 years now.
So Pat, I got to tell you this story real quick. My dad is an accountant, and he was an auditor for a major oil and gas drilling firm. And when I was in high school, we lived comfortably. I mean, we were never rich by any means, but we lived very comfortably. And my dad says, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, Dad, I think I just want to do what you do. And at that time, he was dealing with a bunch of embezzlement cases in his international drilling firm. And he goes, "Son," you don't want to do what I do. And I said, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, you don't." And I said, "Well, I just went to the dentist today. I think I want to be a dentist." And he goes, "That's a better idea." So
it certainly worked out.
Yeah. And the thing is I think of you doing what you do. And I was like, hey, this is kind of a cross between Chad and Chad's dad. So, I can dig it, man. Good. Kudos to you for going back and getting after it.
So what happened, Chad?
I became a dentist. The rest is history, man. The rest is history.
Or do you just play one on TV?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it'd be law school, I think.
Oh, to hell with that.
I'm just saying.
I'm actually with JB on that. I've really enjoyed
an advocate for dentists. I think, kind of to Pat's point, like I think I'd have the or the desire, at least intentionally, initially.
Well, that was something I considered too. It's just at the time I was about, I guess, an hour and a half away from the nearest law school, and I didn't see how I could handle that being a full-time law student, and also, still, be part of a family and a profession. And now I decided, accounting was going to be a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so, to you.
Yeah. So you decide, okay, I don't want to do public accounting. I'm not even sure I want to be a dental CPA and during tax time. So then what was the next step? What happened after that? I know you said you were introduced through Linda to everyone at Prosperident. Was it just natural to get into embezzlement? I mean, it sounds like that's your real passion. Even though you talked about so many things, practice management, you talked about future planning, but it sounds like that's really where your heart is.
Yeah, and at first I was a little concerned about whether I had that mindset to be, on the embezzlement side. David and I talked quite a bit, probably over about a 2 or 3 month period to see if it was something I wanted to try. And as I got into it, I learned what I never learned in college. And that, in college, they teach a lot of things about internal controls and things you can implement in your practice. And if you do all these A, B, C, D controls, the theory is you don't get embezzled because you can prevent the embezzlement from happening. And it didn't take me too many cases into that for, David kind of convinced me, and my cases convinced me that embezzlers are very motivated people. And there's a reason they embezzle. And by definition, embezzlers are criminals, so they're not following the rules. So putting in procedure saying A, B, C, D, they're not going to do that. And so that's when I really found out the awesome task of embezzling. And $1.3 million in embezzlement later, I'm still here and learning things on every case.
How much?
1.3 million, and I'm not even in first place at Prosperident.
Yeah.
So
is that right?
It's Prosperident has been in business for 35 years, and so I guess that's bad news on one hand, is that embezzlement is still active. But we're trying to educate dentists on things that they can do, and also work on the practice management side as well. We have an owner's proactive strategies segment, which I also started getting into during the lecture you attended, where we talk about the actual business side of dentistry. Hopefully the business side gets dentists more profitable, because most practices, they're not being embezzled currently. Over time, the odds improve. They can be embezzled, but we want to make sure dentists have the tools, and their team members have the tools to make sure that they've got the right business systems in place, because they don't teach this in dental school. It was just my only business education I got in dental school was hire a good CPA and a good dental attorney, and that's all that I learned. So we literally are on our own, and we either join a DSO and let them do it for us, or we maintain our independence, and we have to put on a CEO hat every so often, because dentistry is different from most other professions, and medical as well. But our primary purpose is delivering quality patient care. That's what we want to do. That's what we go into our office to do every day. But we're also running a small business, which means we're also a CEO. And it's that CEO part that trips a lot of us up. So, my goal is to educate as many dentists as we can, and obviously Prosperident as well. I'm just one of a number of very qualified consultants and examiners, and that's our goal. Is we want to provide education.
Do you think tell us a little bit about Prosperident and how big is Prosperident, and how many examiners do you have?
So David Harris founded Prosperident. Last month was our 35th anniversary. So Prosperident's been around quite some time, actually based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So it's a Canadian firm, but obviously most of our business is in the United States, and most of the examiners are in the U.S. because more dentists in the U.S. than Canada. But our rules and laws are very similar. So we, over the years, I joined 12 years ago. So I think I'm number 3 in seniority right now, but we're pushing about 20 examiners right now. So the company is growing, which is great news, but it's also, from the dental standpoint, it's bad news, because it means people are still out there embezzling, but also more and more dentists want to learn the business principles as well, so that maybe, they can defend themselves better from embezzlement, although we can never guarantee you'll never be embezzled. But we certainly want to give dentists and their team members the tools they need to not only make the practice safer, but most of all, we want the practice to be profitable so that the doctor and the team members win.
So how, I'm trying to figure out how to pose this question, but when would you suggest, or how would a dentist know that they need to engage Prosperident? I'm sorry, that's maybe ignorant, but it's something that's kind of on my mind, because I don't feel that I've been in that position yet, and thankfully, but I'm sure that there's people that know it, and what does your clientele look like as they engage you all?
Well, first off, you're not ignorant at all. And again, we don't learn business principles in dental school, but on the embezzlement side, I would say the number one client that we get is the doctor will tell us something along the lines like, well, Pat, I don't know what's going on. I'm producing more than I've ever produced in my career, but I just had to take out a line of credit to meet payroll this week. And I'm dead broke, and yet I'm producing all of this production, supposedly, and I don't know what's going on. And that's certainly a big red flag that something is happening. It could be embezzlement, or it could just simply be the team and the doctors not communicating well, and a lot of mistakes are being made. So red flags can mean embezzlement, but it can also mean that the business systems are not communicating. And certainly software. What I found throughout my time with Prosperident is that most doctors just aren't reading their software reports. They're not sure if the reports are accurate to begin with. They don't know what to communicate to their dental team that they need. And the dental team is sort of kind of figuring out what to do on their own, because most team members don't have accounting degrees either. They don't have a business background. So everybody's in dentistry to take care of patients, but no one really knows, though, how do you run the business and how do you make that work?
And what would you say are some of the most important? So let's say we have a lot of listeners out there right now, and they're, maybe either starting out or not very comfortable in using their software. What are some of the most important KPIs that they should be looking at on a regular basis? I know we talked a little bit about that in the course, but I think that's such important information, is like, what are some of the, if you don't do anything else this month, look at these KPIs or key practice indicators.
Right. And those indicators, they certainly will vary between practice to practice, and from general dentist to a specialist. Really what we tell dentists the starting point is you at least need to know the basic reports that you need to run. And of course, with practice management software, they can print hundreds of reports if you want them to. What we try to do, we boil it down to say at the very minimum, each day the doctor should know, whether it's through a day sheet. Some practice management software, you might have to print 3 or 4 different reports, but you absolutely need to know what you produced that day and get your procedure breakdown. But you've got to get your production. You need to also understand, okay, what did I adjust out that day? Obviously, if we're involved with PPOs, managed care, we know what a contractual adjustment means. So that's going to come off our production. Other adjustments that we give come off of productions, like professional courtesy, senior citizen discounts. And what we find is most doctors just don't realize how much they're writing off in adjustments. So you want to know what you produced, but you also need to know what you adjusted to arrive at what we call adjusted production. That adjusted production is your number that you're really looking at that you need to collect. And adjusted production would include adjustments such as write-offs. So when you understand what your adjusted production is, again, adjustments minus production minus adjustments, that production, adjusted production, you should be looking to collect 100% of that. Very close, because if you're not collecting 100% of what you've already written off, that means now you and your team aren't collecting the money, either as you're producing it or statements aren't being sent out. So absolutely, dentists need to understand their production, their adjustments. That arrives at the collections. And then they need to understand how those collections are broken down. You need to know what you collect in cash each day, what you reconcile on a monthly basis, not only with your software, but with your financial statements, such as your bank account, your merchant service account. So while those aren't technically KPIs, what they're doing, though, is they're ensuring now that your practice management software at the end of the month is agreeing with your bank statements and your merchant service statements.
Most basic of basic. Yeah.
The basics of basics. And once you know what you're collecting in your software, you know it's going into the bank. Now you can start looking at, okay, how much of that was my restorative versus crown and bridge versus endo, and how's my expenses looking? What's my payroll in relation to my adjusted production? How much am I paying my accountant, my marketing? Those are your actual KPIs that you calculate, but you can't calculate those KPIs until you actually know that you're collecting the exact amount. And I would say to the doctors and the team members listening tonight, don't just think that your software is always going to be correct. You've heard the term garbage in equals garbage out. If there's mistakes being made, and we make innocent mistakes every day. Doctors, the team members, we can't catch those mistakes if we're not actually looking at those reports at the end of the day and verifying those numbers are real. And once we know those numbers are accurate, now we can make sure those funds are getting deposited into our bank accounts. And that's how we formulate our KPIs with the assistance of our CPAs.
Would you agree that one of the most important things to look at is that accounts receivable cumulatively works out? That, you take yesterday's AR, and if what you produced or what you actually collected today is subtracted out of that or added to it, however you want to say it, that number should add up. And if something doesn't add up there, maybe there's a problem.
That's right. And one of the biggest issues that I see with most of the clients that I work with, whether it's on the embezzlement side or our owner proactive strategy side, most doctors really don't understand what their AR or accounts receivables is. And this is actually a big portion of my business lecture. And I was just getting into that at the presentation that you attended. I spend a lot of time on AR because that's the killer in a lot of practices. That's when the dentist calls us and says, I can't pay my bills. What's going on? And obviously, one of the first places we're going to look is the accounts receivables. Mm-hmm. And most practices, they just don't know what their true accounts receivable balances are, or they'll look at their software. And I don't know how much time you want me to spend on accounts receivables, but that's really the thing that can really make or break a practice. So I'll spend as little or as much time on AR as you want. But the one thing I would say, though, is when you print out your AR report for your practice management software, you're getting what's called a standard accounts receivables report. And again, for the very basic, the accounts receivables means this is what patients owe us. So that's at the elementary level, that's what an accounts receivable means. But there's also times, though, where we might get overpaid, either by a patient or an insurance. If we don't understand that, well, now our AR is reversed. It's not the patient owing us, we owe the patient. And now there's actually federal law and state law that actually says that we must refund patients in a timely manner if they've overpaid, or insurance companies. So we have to refund that. We can't keep it. And the problem is most doctors aren't aware of that. They don't know what their credit balances are because they're reading one long standard accounts receivables report that has both the debits, that's the normal AR that patients owe us, but it also has the credits that we owe them. Those numbers get offset. So we actually have to print out 3 different accounts receivables reports to get a real good handle of this. Our software doesn't always make that easy, but we need to know exactly what patients owe us. In a separate report, we need to know what we owe back our patients and insurance companies. And then the standard AR are the two combined. And I'll give you an example recently of a practice that was a train wreck. And it was unfortunate, but when I looked at the accounts receivables, their debit.
Wait, you have not been in my office.
Oh, I have not. Okay. You're right. I have not. But no, I had this practice, though, that when I looked at the 0 to 30 day, which is your current AR, that's the biggest number that you should have. You should not have big numbers in your 30 to 60, 60 to 90, et cetera. Well, that number is always going to be a positive number. I'm not going to teach debits and credits here tonight, but that should be a large positive number. I see practices, though, where the current AR is a negative number, meaning a credit balance. That means the practice owes more than what they're owed back from patients. And when I saw this number and I actually printed out the reports for the doctor in both the debit and the credit, the doctor owed $100,000 in refunds, even though the doctor's accounts receivables report said the AR was $30,000, which for that practice would have been a very healthy number. But what the doctor didn't realize, though, is that $30,000, $100,000 of that was credits. So patients actually owed him $120,000, but he owed also patients and insurance companies $100,000. So that $30,000 was a totally false number. And what I would tell the members tonight is, please, you must monitor your AR every single month. You've got to know, is it going up or is it going down, and why? Because if your AR goes up from 1 month to the next, it means that, well, perhaps your team's not collecting the deductibles and copays. Maybe statements didn't get sent out on time. Or it could be you had a great month with production and it's going to take you another 30 days or so to collect that. So you can't just look at 1 month. You've got to look at this month after month and see what the trends are. But it's very important. It's really one of the biggest weaknesses I see, at least on our consulting side, is doctors really have no idea of what their accounts receivables are.
And
I would totally agree.
The reports that come out are somewhat helpful, but we run a extended credit business, right? Where we don't always get paid at time of service. We get paid at some time at some future date. And it may be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, depending. And so in our practice, even we've had to go to basically an Excel doc. So we export a lot of that out, and all of those AR outstanding balances have explanations by a good number of them. Like, why is it 60 days? And it's because we had to go refile and they didn't accept it first come around because a piece of information was incorrect or whatever. Like, it gets so complicated, frankly, that, if you don't have a good team member or a good outside third party person that you're working with to sort of continue to work that, I don't see how a dentist alone, or even a dentist and an office manager, given the myriad of other tasks that they're managing on a daily basis,
that's right.
Stay on top of it.
Exactly. The doctor has to be able to trust the team member, and the team members are accountable to the doctor, but the doctor is also accountable to the team members.
Yep.
So, accuracy has to be ensured. Doing the notes for the AR, the reason that AR is, say, 60 days past due, that's vital. You need to know why. And there's actually reports. I recommend our clients, one of the reports they need to print out monthly is an outstanding insurance claims report. That will actually show you now what the insurance companies owe you. And now you ask, well, why have I not been paid by this insurance company for 60 days? Because if you wait too long, they won't pay you because of timely submission errors.
Yeah.
So that outstanding insurance claims report is one of the vital reports that we recommend as well. So there's a checklist of reports that we recommend being run on a daily, but also a monthly basis. And if the doctor and the team's not in sync with that, those numbers get away from you. And then that's one day when the doctor wakes up, and again, it might not be embezzlement, but all of a sudden the doctor can't pay the bills because the accounts receivables are $200,000. And the doctor says, I had no idea.
Do you find that it's back to the embezzlement topic? Is it easier for embezzlement to happen now with digital age, or more difficult? And, or is it the compression of the economy that it will kind of see it ebb and flow a little bit because the demand or need for those additional funds might get compressed as well?
The economy certainly can be a factor. And I want to say also, if there's team members attending tonight, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on you, because regrettably, team members aren't the only ones who embezzle. When I say team members, I mean non-doctors, because it's unfortunate. Doctors also embezzle from other doctors, associates from owners, owners from associates. So it's unfortunately, embezzlement affects everybody. Economy can have something to do with it, but basically, you never always understand where your team member or associate doctor's mind is at the time. You may not know what financial problems they're having, but with embezzlement, there's some sort of financial issue that they're having, or it's an ego issue. For example, they think they're very important. They want to be like the doctor. They think they should earn more money like the doctor. If they feel like they're not being compensated as well, or they want to live the lifestyle of a doctor, well, sometimes that means they're going to have to borrow money from the doctor without the doctor knowing it. Or the associate will borrow it from the owner, or the owner will borrow it from the associate. We have a couple of cases a year where the spouse is the one doing the embezzling. So it's just, it's an equal opportunity crime. And we don't always are able to identify the actual cause of why someone embezzled. We just know when it's happened, when the doctor has to pick up the phone and find out what the heck is happening. And it's tough. So we can't put everybody into a box. There's a lot of reasons people embezzle out there, and the economy can be doing great, but somebody on the team can be having financial issues for a variety of reasons, and we just may or may not even know that.
So let's take a sidestep here, and let's talk about, you see a lot of clients in, over the years, you've seen a lot of clients. What would you say are what are some of the most common mistakes and oversights that most dentists make when managing their practices, managing the financial side of their practices?
On the financial practice management side, they're not reviewing their reports. Most clients, I have to say, if they're an embezzlement client as opposed to a consulting client, although a lot of our consulting clients as well, they're not even looking at the day sheet every day. Sometimes we hear team members just say, well, I don't give the doctor the day sheet anymore because doctors don't look at it anyway. So absolutely on the practice management side, there are certain reports that the doctor, you need to spend 15 or 20 minutes in the day reviewing. And then again, on the monthly side, it's not just the practice management. You have to take what the practice management software says and then follow the collections into your bank account. And what I see with a lot of doctors, they're just not doing that. They trust whoever in the office is doing that for them. They're trusting their CPA, and CPAs are great at numbers, but most CPAs don't understand a dental practice unless they're specifically a dental CPA. But even the CPA is not there every day looking at the daily reports or what's going on. So I see doctors failing in two areas. They're not reviewing their software reports and ensuring those reports are accurate to begin with. And then they're not cross-referencing those reports to their bank accounts.
I just want to say, I know all of that's correct. And I also recognize as part of the responsibility, but I can't help but also just say that the amount of responsibilities that have fallen on the dentist in the last 10 years of all the regulatory issues and the complications, it's becoming almost unmanageable. If everything ultimately flows to the CEO of the practice, which is the doctor in 80% of cases, and yet they're the widget maker too. And so they spend at least 8 hours a day making widgets. And then how many hours a day do they have to then give beyond that to be the CEO of the practice? And it's becoming, and particularly now, if you look at the male-female split and, work-life balance and people not wanting to get burnt out and actually wanting to go home and see their family at the end of a long day, I don't know what the answer is anymore, because I do think that's a big part of, dentists feeling incredibly overwhelmed and burnt out is they're being paid less, doing more. And then ultimately the managerial responsibilities just keep kind of stacking up on them. They come to a desk and all they can do, to your point, is trust their office manager, their accountant, their CPA, their attorney, whatever, to hopefully lead them in the right direction, because they simply don't have the bandwidth to do it anymore.
Absolutely. And enter the DSOs.
Correct.
Because that's their number one selling point to dentists is, we'll be your accountant. We'll take care of this for you. You just be the dentist. And that has an appeal, especially to the younger dentists. They don't want to learn the business side, so they go into the DSOs. And, I'm not here to bash DSOs. They have a purpose, but the dentist has to understand, though, that they're an employee of the DSO. Yeah, they'll earn a decent income. But the best thing to do, if you're looking at dentistry as a way of serving your patients, but also being rewarded, is still in practice ownership. Because you not only pay yourself, but now you get to keep the profit that's above the overhead, which is, the DSO. They're not doing this for free. They're taking a 15 to 20% management profit for themselves and then paying the doctor as well. And you're right, the doctor can't do it all. And I can't tell a doctor to spend 2 hours at the end of every day doing this. So you have to develop trust with a team member. And what we highly recommend is you cannot put all your trust in one team member. For one, that's not fair to the team member. Now you've got a stressed out team member that's more prone to innocent mistakes. We really emphasize cross-training and then what we call rotation of duties. When you do that, now you're taking a trust factor and you're spreading it among more than one person. For an embezzler to successfully embezzle, they need to be doing a lot of work on their own and doing things in secret, having all the responsibility. We say, no, if you have 2 or 3 people working up front, they all need to know how to do each other's jobs. You're not telling them you have to work 3 times harder if there's 3 of you up there. but they have to be familiar with the aspects of the business team. And then you rotate those duties, because now that means that somebody else that makes a deposit today, well, so that means tomorrow somebody else is going to be making the deposit, and somebody else is going to be entering the payments into the software. Now you've got accountability, but not only with accountability, but you start catching a lot of innocent mistakes that way. And all of a sudden, everybody becomes more accurate. And that makes your end of the month reporting a lot easier for the doctor. And, we want the doctors to get this at the end of the month down in 2 to 3 hours. And that's a reasonable goal that a doctor can reach once they understand the reports they need to print, how to reconcile, how to work with their accountant, but also ensuring that the team members have those rotation of duties and cross-training. The more responsibility they give to one person, the more of a sitting duck the doctor is. And it may not be embezzlement, but if someone is committing or they're making mistakes, it's not, it's unintentional, but they're still making the mistakes. And those mistakes can be just as expensive as embezzlement if they're not caught. And it takes dedicated teamwork. So the doctor and the business team as a whole have to be working in synergy.
I had a team member that was ill, and God love her. She worked with us for a number of years, and unintentionally things got kind of out of hand. There was a lot of trust. She was the only person doing certain things in the office, and we did run into a bit of a financial issue. It was not embezzlement, but I love what you're saying is the accountability and spreading the wealth amongst a few team members, because our demise, at that time was, one person doing it for so long and so often and every day. And then all of a sudden you're in this huge bundle of trouble financially. The money was there somewhere.
Somewhere, exactly.
Right there.
Right.
And, we ran into quite a hiccup, and I love this spreading the wealth. And now we have 3 people that are accountable for it, in one way or another. And they hold each other accountable, and it's a much different environment. It's very much healthier, but I get it. I get exactly what you're saying. And I can attest to the fact that it doesn't always work greatly.
Yeah. And think about also in your situation, you had one person with most of the knowledge on the financial side. Now he or she's no longer in the practice, and everybody else is saying, well, what do we do? And that can grind the practice to a halt. And the whole idea with cross-training and separation of duties is now if someone goes on vacation, the office doesn't shut down for a week. And again, if someone's making innocent mistakes, that's how you catch those mistakes early. They're easy to correct early. They're not so easy to correct like 6 months from now when your accounts receivables are $200,000.
Or when you've got a new employee coming in because only one person knew how to do it. I mean, trust me, I can attest to that. It's just that cross-training really helps when you've got to bring somebody new in, when somebody retires, when somebody's fired, when somebody leaves for one reason or another. There's many reasons to cross-train.
And one of the biggest frustrations we have is we're hired by clients to look at, see, are they being embezzled? Is it innocent mistakes? The office manager has left for whatever reason, either on good terms or bad terms. And now all of a sudden the doctor doesn't know how to log into anything. The doctor doesn't know the username. They don't know the passwords. And now we're sitting here saying, okay, now we've got to figure out how to get into the doctor's software. And what we find out is the office manager had all the keys to the kingdom. And now that one person has left the practice. And if they leave on bad terms, they're not always going to voluntarily give that information back. So this is another reason I cannot stress enough. We got to look at our reports. We've got to look at accountability. But don't forget cross-training and separation of duties. Don't let one person have all the power. And that includes if you're in a practice and there's 3 partners and 4 associates, those partners have to be accountable to each other as well. And they have to be accountable to the associates. So it's about cross-training for everybody. It's the doctor and the team.
It's funny. None of what you said seems at all familiar to me.
No. I know nothing. No.
Well, it sounds like
good.
It sounds like you're on the right. Just basing on what I've heard from you, you're doing a lot of the right things. So yeah, At least you're not going to the bank to borrow money to make payroll.
It's from learning how I did a lot of the wrong things. It's not because of any divine knowledge.
Experience is a great educator.
Yeah.
I'll never forget when this team member left, unfortunately for health. We were lost, man. And I've never been so thankful in my life in 2022 for a Mead Spiral notebook that I found that had the keys to the kingdom in it. I was like, thank you. I mean, I realized that she was incredibly organized in her own way. And it wasn't the way that I would have organized things, but if I did not have that, I would have been screwed, glued, and tattooed.
And there's certain keys to the kingdom that only you should have, like access to your NPI, access to the drug database, insurance. So only the doctor really should be the ones to be able to communicate with the insurance. Well, obviously the teams want to communicate with the insurance companies, but also the doctor needs to be able to understand, though, that I've got to be able to talk to Aetna as well. And I need to make sure that important mail from Aetna comes to my preferably home address and not the office address. So there's just certain things the doctor needs to know. And IT, for example, the doctor needs to be the administrator of the network, even if the doctor doesn't know how to turn the computer on.
Yes.
That's what IT professionals are for.
So
we should.
You're saying something now that is, this is just blowing up in my head, because I recently had a problem with somebody that not working with me anymore, not for a while, but I think electronic statements have been both a blessing and a curse at the same time, because there's something to be said about every piece of mail goes to my desk and then goes from there. I will pull out my things, and I get it, that can be manipulated as well. But the problem with a lot of e-statements and things like that is it's so easy for people that have the keys to the kingdom to go in and say, okay, I'm the only one that gets that e-statement now. And maybe it's 4 months, maybe it's 6 months before you notice. But I mean, we had some issues like that, and it wasn't anything financial. As it was a lot of stuff where everything from the insurance companies, only went to one email address, and it wasn't mine.
Exactly.
And, and it's just too easy to manipulate those things digitally. I guess that's my big concern.
And that goes back to Jennifer's earlier question that I only partially answered. Is does technology make it easier to embezzle or harder? And the answer is both. If you can hide a lot of things in data, and especially if only one person has access to that data, truly has access, and it's not the doctor, now that data makes it easier to embezzle. The good news, though, is if you understand how to interpret reports and you verify those reports for accuracy, your data can also make it easier to catch embezzlement. So it's a two-way street, but it means, though, the doctor has to have the knowledge to know what to look for, or at least know who to go to double check everything behind the doctor, such as an accountant, or maybe there's companies that will do electronic filing now and automatically put the money into the doctor's bank account. A lot of advantages to that. There's disadvantages, but in the end, though, the doctor has to have the advisors to double check all this. Or periodically, we obviously know there's some self-interest here, but doctors periodically, I think, need a physical, or that they need a periodic oral exam and have their practices examined, and have an outside set of eyes that know what to look for to either provide consulting, or in the worst case scenario, maybe there's some wrongdoing. But doctors need to have advisors, and please don't be afraid to pay an advisor every so often, because we're sitting ducks when we come out of dental school, and 30 years later, even selling a practice. A lot of times we don't know the numbers are accurate, and then we find out someone buys a practice, for example, and the numbers weren't right, and now you've got a buyer who's overpaid for a practice, and vice versa. So those numbers have to be accurate from right out of dental school all the way to the sale of the practice.
Well, Pat, you couldn't have closed it any better. We're at 9:30. This is our time, so we try not to keep everybody late, but you closed it perfectly. How do people get in touch with you, with Prosperident, if they feel like, it's time for my physical?
Well, Prosperident.com will get you straight into Prosperident, and that's a good starting point. If you need to contact me personally, it's pat.little@prosperident.com. And any questions like that, I can certainly refer it to David. David Harris, obviously, is the CEO and founder of Prosperident. So he's the one that will do a lot of the consultations with the doctors. But start with our website. From there, Prosperident's huge on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So it's pretty easy to find us. But if a doctor wants to know how to get started and they want to come to me to get started, pat.little@embezzlement. Or at Prosperident, pat.little@prosperident.com, and I will get you in touch with the right people.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Great seeing you again. Great catching up again. And we hope to have you on. We could go down any one of these rabbit holes in an hour, but
Get me 8 to 12 hours so that I can get most of it in.
Thanks again. Chad, you want to close this out?
I'd be happy to. First of all, congrats to Prosperident on 35 years. Thank you, Pat, for being here. And I just think it's a really good time for every single one of us to take a deep look at your practice, try and figure out where you're at, and realize that none of us, no matter how good or how bad we are, none of us are immune to being embezzled from. And so understand that the nasty little demon is there and it can get you at any point in time. So stay on top of your KPIs, stay on top of your numbers. Jeff and I both brought this up and we were thinking the same thing. Stay on top of your accounts receivable and understand where that money's coming from and where it's going to, and how much not only is owed to you, but is owed to your patient population as well. So
absolutely
stay on top of it, folks. Don't get lost in the minutia, but make sure that you are on top of your numbers and you're not being embezzled from. And if you have any questions, contact Prosperident. So
absolutely.
Thanks everybody for being here, and have a wonderful evening.
Great. Thank all of you so much. I appreciate that. Bye. Thank you.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.